Welcome to the Revived and Renewed podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Omari. Thank you so much for joining us today. On today's episode, we'll be talking about childhood trauma. This is part 1. And our speaker is Mr. Christopher Bonner, and he'll be joining us on the other side as we just do a recap of last season's episodes. The Revived and Renewed podcast, where we share interesting topics, testimonies, scriptures, and biblical life principles.
Forgiveness is actually a really popular chapter in the book. That's the one that I get the most comments and testimonies from persons that are believers and non-believers alike. So it shows that this is something that a lot of persons struggle with, whether in the kingdom or not.
One of the things that really troubled me growing up was depression, heavy depression, and even suicidal thoughts and tendencies. Right, and a lot of times I was just tired of life. I wanted a way out. And
one evening, my mom left for the hospital, and she ended up dying at the hospital from an asthma attack. And my world was shattered because, of course, I did mention it. I lost my father, while I was younger, and I could not understand it. And so in my mind, I said, clearly God doesn't love me, because he kept removing people who were very dear
I will
to me.
praise thee, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will shew forth all thy marvelous works. I will be glad and rejoice in thee. I will sing praise to thy name, O Most High. When mine enemies are turned back, they shall fall and perish at thy presence.
So, number 1 in verse 10, he says, finally, brother, be strong in the Lord. And it literally means in the original, it means be filled with power in the Lord and in the power of his might, and which is literally his ability. So he's saying, I want you to be filled with power in the Lord, and I want you to walk in the strength of his abilities. So the first thing that really gripped me when it comes to this whole thing of walking in the armor of God and being in a place where we can have victory in the warfare that we're dealing with, because he goes on and says, hey, there's a warfare going on. You're not wrestling against people, although sometimes it may look like you are, you're really not.
We are the priest of your household. Remember now, God told us in his word, that being the priest, it means that you are the head now. So it tells you that you have authority. You have that power, to usher your family. And for those of us who just have your wife, to usher your wife into the presence of God. Because just as Christ, who is the head of the church, we are the head of our household. And this is what God really wants for us to be as a praying husband.
If you have a relationship that you don't communicate, that one is dead. That's a dead relationship.
Amen.
So it is important that we pray. If we are not praying, we will not grow.
Okay. So, can you just introduce yourself, share a little bit about your background?
My name is Chris. I live in Georgia. I'm a military vet. I served 8.5 years in the military. I've served all over the world. I'm back in Georgia. I spend most of my time now between helping my family, substitute teaching for the local high school and early college. And pretty much just staying to myself for now. I'm a homebody, so if I don't have to be around people, I don't be around people.
Understood. I'm like that sometimes. So this podcast is me coming out of my shell, actually. All right. And today we're going to be talking about trauma. So can you tell me how it has affected your life? Just like an overview.
It's made me be more aware of when to be around people and when to just completely shut them out. Most people would think that because I'm an easygoing person and I can pretty much spark a conversation with anybody, that I would be an extrovert because certain things I do, but I'm really just an extroverted introvert.
I see.
Because when the energy goes, I'm out the door. you
I
know.
totally understand and I totally agree. All right. Can you please share a traumatic experience, please?
I think one traumatic experience I would share dealt with around the time that it's probably 2 and 1. My dad passed away unexpectedly in 2006.
Hmm.
And around that time, I had started living with him after 2001 because I was tired of staying with my mom. And since they had joint custody, I could choose where I wanted to go. So I chose to stay with him.
I
And
see.
so I was there with him during the time when he got ill. And then he ended up passing away right before I joined the military, which um kind of kept me from joining the military because I had to handle his affairs, which took longer than expected.
I see.
And pretty much I had to go through everything by myself because the family really wasn't um, able to help me kind of coach through anything. So I
Hmm.
spent a couple of years um, doing that because my time for the military was actually supposed to start right after I graduated high school, but he got terminally ill. So I spent roughly 3.5 years pretty much wondering what to do, helping him, and then he finally passed. And then after that, it was just pretty much me being on my own, just trying to navigate through life. Then I wasn't speaking to my mom during that time because it took me a while to figure out that she had disowned me. Once I
Oh,
realized that she had moved to a completely different city and pretty much packed up her entire household after my brother graduated and relocated to a different part of Georgia and just didn't bother to tell me.
wow. That is something heavy that any child would cause a child to just feel some type of way within. And you just carrying the load of your father passing, that I bet that couldn't be easy. You just graduating from high school, trying to figure out life, and then boom, here comes this event that you weren't even prepared for. And how did you realize that you were being affected by these experiences?
Um, Probably when I realized that things just kept going in the same direction and they just kept, and the time period felt like, oh, they said, well, you should get over this. And it would, after a certain period of time, you can just adjust to what they call, quote unquote, the new normal. There
Mm-hmm.
was no new normal because it was like pretty much the few people who I could count on were I later found out were pretty much backstabbing me,
Oh,
and they were trying to pretty much have an impact on the people who were helping me, you know, and the people who were helping me, they were pretty much letting me know what the other people were doing. And so I had to have a conflict between, everybody. So I learned it was a lot of mistrust,
right.
and I had a lot of trust issues around who I could believe and who I could be around. And
Mm,
even to this day, some of those same people, I've mended some relationships, but then there's others that I deal with from a long handle spoon because I just, the trust factor really isn't there too much, but they've done things
right.
to try to redeem themselves. But, as far as like, others, it's just like pretty much, I don't deal with them at all.
That's a part of your healing process too. And just learning to heal from it, letting go and moving forward. And oftentimes some people believe that because you have forgiven people, you should just let them back into your life, but you also have to use wisdom and protect yourself, because if people keep doing things to hurt you, they really do not belong in your life. And I'm just thinking about what you just said about trust. I'm just thinking about your whole story, that while you're there trying to grieve your dad, this is what's happening. So it's like, you know, bunch of emotions coming out: anger, betrayal, hurt, pain. It's just wow. I can I can only imagine. I can actually feel your pain. I really do hope I don't start crying. Um, what were some of the signs that you noticed that you were being affected?
Um, let's see. When the things the feelings it's like they wouldn't go away.
Hmm.
And it felt, you know, like when they talk about, they define, medical professionals describe depression as a uh long state of sadness that's like longer than 6 weeks or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that certain things it just wasn't improving.
Right. I
And
see.
because it wasn't improving, I knew something was wrong. And then it was like, um, and then at the same time, it's like, I'm a very easygoing person. And it's just, after a while, people said that my attitude towards certain things, the way I responded to people just changed. I became a little bit more harsh and cold hearted.
Mm.
Like I didn't have a filter. I didn't care what I said. And to a certain extent, I'm still the same way now. I say it's changed me for the better and for the worse, because it's like, I mean, I've held my tongue in for so long. So for after a while, it's just like, if I'm gonna say it, if I'm gonna say it, I mean what I say, and I'm not gonna take it back. I'm just gonna, whatever consequences come from it, it just comes from it. But at this point, you know, I'm almost 40 years old, now. So I was 20 then.
Mm.
I've grown a lot more, and at this point, it's just like, if the people are meant to be in your life, they're gonna be there, and if they're not, then oh well to them.
Right. But that is just your way of protecting you.
Yeah.
And some people wouldn't understand that unless they have to walk in your shoes. Um, ha- did this affect your maturity in any way? Like, and your view
Um,
of the world?
It did affect my maturity because honestly, I had to grow tough skin early on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did, around the time that my dad passed, I had just started my first state job, which was working in a youth development center.
Mm.
And so it was like, where the troubled juveniles go. So I was working with them, and then I transitioned into the prison system where I was working with the boot campers and also still dealing with the juveniles,
Mm.
because I had the experience. And you learn you have to be a certain way when you're around them to not really show them that you're not scared, because I was never scared to be around them, but it was more so
Right.
to show confidence and show discipline around them. And not say, because they're gonna call you everything but a child of God. And you know sometimes they do it just to intimidate you or try to intimidate you, and just to show that they're
Right.
not intimidated, but it's just so that kind of it forced me to do that. And then at the same time, it's like it forced me to put relationships and different things on the back burner.
I understand.
Because pretty much after my dad passed, I was homeless. So I had to figure out what I was going to do. And I didn't want to burden family by staying with them for too long.
I see.
And so, once I had the opportunity to renew my opportunity to join the military, that's what I set my sights on.
Understood. Um, you said dealing with the kids you had experience, but what I'm getting to understand is not it's not just experience because of like your educational background, but also because of what you had to endure. So whatever you have been through, it's like you can now see these kids, you can now see yourself in these kids' eyes or their own situation. And I think you can be able to help them better because you have been there, you have done that. And because you have been there and done that, you can help them prevent certain things from happening. So it's not just because of your educational background or whatever, it's also what you had to endure. And please do not take whatever you're doing lightly, because it takes a strong person to do that. Um, how can we as family members, friends, neighbors identify someone who's suffering from trauma?
Um, don't take what they say lightly. You know, if um certain things that, you know, people may say it may make certain comments or make just certain types of conversations with people,
Mm-hmm.
and their response may be just to laugh it off or to just kind of ignore it and change the subject. Is their way of just like, you know, I'm not going to talk about that right now.
Right,
You know, they're not necessarily dismissing it, but it's just not the right place or the right time.
right. Or maybe they just don't trust that person to really express how they're feeling. So we
Yeah.
have to think, yeah. So I know that people are listening who have been through trauma or is still currently going through it. Do you have any encouragement for these people?
Give yourself grace and mercy, because honestly, we're our number one critic. We are
Mm-hmm.
our biggest cheerleader, and we are the our worst own enemy, because
Right,
you know, we're around ourselves most of the time, more than anyone else.
right,
And because of that, you know, we know what our deepest fears are, and other people around us don't, because they're not really around. Some people know you, but they don't fully know you. You know, they may say, well, I know you better than you, and they can try to tell you certain things, but it's like, that's still only limited. They may hit certain points, certain nails
right.
on the head with the hammer, but they don't fully know who you are. And sometimes,
Yeah.
even when they do, you know, when they say stuff like that, you know, that can be a trigger point, because that may take you someplace where it's like, okay, now you've brought out the proverbial devil. So now you're gonna be subjected to the trigger that you just set off.
I really do appreciate your transparency and what you had to share with us today. It also gives me a lot to think about, the people that are around me, and also for myself to analyze, how am I dealing with people who are suffering from trauma around me? Am I being too judgmental? Am I being sincere? Am I being patient? Because people who are hurting, they do need our patience. They don't just need sympathy or empathy, but they need our patience, and to understand that healing is a process and we can't rush it, because everyone is different and everybody's story is different. And so I'm really grateful for you sharing these little pointers for us today. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Um, give yourself patience. Give yourself a lot of patience, because certain things, it's gonna take more time. And sometimes you have to be, you're like an onion. There's many
Mm.
layers that you have to peel off, and you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable to a certain extent
Right.
in order to allow people to be able to help you, you know. But and don't set unrealistic expectations. Don't expect people to do what you do, because that was one thing that I just stopped doing after a while. Um, because I realized that people don't have the same heart as I do. So when I do things for people, you know, I do it because I want to. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just a giving person. I'm a kind person. I'm gonna help you. I don't necessarily, I don't expect anything in return. I just do it because I want to do it. So if someone doesn't do anything back, or you know, I hear something like, oh, well, they didn't do this back to you and you did all this. I'm like, okay, well, it is what it is. You know, I'll just know next time if I'm in a similar situation, just take it with a grain of salt and just be a little bit more mindful,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but, you know, just if you don't set any expectations of somebody to do something, then you won't, you
Be
know,
disappointed.
you won't be surprised or disappointed when, if the hurt comes,
Right.
you
That
know, and
is
at the
so
same,
true. So thank you so much again, Chris, for sharing your story and these pointers or nuggets that we should take into consideration as persons who have or is still going through trauma, or if we have family members or friends going through trauma. So thank you again.
no problem.
Just to do a summary of some of the things that we spoke about today on today's episode, being kind to yourself. So if you're going through a difficult time, if you're suffering from depression, be kind to yourself. Use kind words to yourself. That's one way that you can be kind. Be patient with yourself. And if you know someone who's going through a hard time right now, be patient with them. That's one way that you can support them, and be respectful. Setting healthy boundaries can also help the situation. Trust. If someone's trust is being broken, it can take a while for them to let you back in, or for you to let someone into your life. So that's a process. That's not something that you can rush, right? Discernment is very important during that time. Something Chris said, I'm just reading my notes, something Chris said that really stuck out to me, and I really do respect him for that. He said that he backed away from the dating scene because of what he was dealing with. I really do respect him for that. I don't even know if he knew what he did. He just prevented himself from being hurt further, or hurt someone else emotionally, or even mentally, or even physically, who knows. But when you're going through a hard time, sometimes stepping away from the dating world is the best thing ever. If you're married, you can ask your spouse to support you, or to give you the space that you need to deal with whatever you're trying to deal with. It's life. These are things that we have to deal with. He said the onion theory, that peeling back the different layers. I really did like that. I'm going to be using it, the onion theory. But I really do hope that this episode has been blessing you. And before I go, there's something else that he said before we were recording. He said that children witnessing and hearing certain things can cause trauma in their lives. Also, inconsistency with words and your presence can also cause trauma. So parents, please be careful of the things that you do and say in front of your kids. And remember that your presence is very important to them. Again, I am your host, Ashley Omari, and thank you so much for joining us this week for another episode of the Revived and Renewed podcast. Hi, this is Ashley, your host from the Revived and Renewed podcast. Thank you so much for joining us this season. I am so excited to share what we have for you this season. If you would like to share your testimonies or join in on the topic, please email us at the Revived and Renewed podcast at gmail.com.